Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a part of history that almost nobody asked to remember, let alone relive, but here you are, standing barefoot in the dust of a Byzantine outpost in the year 843 CE, holding a handmade wicker cage filled with confused doves and the scent of fermented millet. You're not a soldier, not a monk, not even a clerk. You're a message sorter. For birds. That's right. Your entire job, your calling, apparently, is to make sure that pigeons know where to fly and what imperial order is tied to their tiny feathered feet. The Anatolian sun is already glaring down like it's mad at you for existing. A bell rings from the chapel behind you, sharp, metallic, insistent, and someone shoves a scroll into your hand before sprinting back inside. Another monk, another message, another sigh. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere odd, drop your city and time in the comments. I love seeing where this sleepy little history trip takes you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the dusty courtyard. The coop is behind the candlemaker's shed, surrounded by a surprisingly well-defended fence. Apparently, someone tried to steal a dove last winter, and the monks haven't stopped talking about it since. Your job begins exactly when everyone else's ends, after the messages have been written, sealed, prayed over, and panicked about. You're the final handoff. You decide which bird gets which message. That would be simple. If the birds weren't moody, if the directions weren't vague, and if the scribes didn't sometimes accidentally smear the wax seal with their lunch grease, there's no real training. You just observe. Watch which birds return where. Tie a tiny parchment to a pigeon's leg, mutter something hopeful, and toss it into the wind. Some birds come back, some don't. You learn quickly that Byzantine military logistics depend more on bird digestion and wind direction than divine order. One gust from the Black Sea, and your message meant for the eastern fortress ends up in a cabbage field outside Smyrna. Historians still argue whether this system was better than a human courier. Your supervisor mutters once, without looking up from his wine, "At least the pigeons don't ask for bread." You take your job seriously, though. You start naming the birds after emperors and saints. Saint Nikitas always flies true. Basil gets lost every third trip. You keep track in a hand-bound codex you're technically not supposed to have, full of wing diagrams, odd pigeon preferences, and one extremely passive-aggressive poem about wax quality. At night, the coops are loud with cooing. You sleep in the sorting room sometimes, head pressed to your bag of seed, because that's the only warmth left after the fire dies down. Once, a monk enters without knocking and finds you gently whispering to a wounded bird. He never speaks of it again. That's how privacy works here. Everyone sees, no one mentions, the year 844 sneaks up on you, and you celebrate by inventing your own dove-sorting shorthand, a mix of Latin abbreviations, bird scratch symbols, and passive-aggressive remarks about the state of the grain feed. You begin to realize something peculiar. Some of the doves seem to prefer certain destinations, not by habit, by attitude. When tied with a letter bound for the coastal garrison, the same bird will puff up, preen, and launch itself with confidence. Bound for the mountain monasteries, feigned limp. You start rewarding them with bits of saffron millet. A quirky theory begins to form in your tired little brain. Dovies have politics. You test it with a series of forged messages. The birds expose your fake seal by refusing to fly. One night, during a lightning storm, you find yourself holding 3 anxious birds and 4 contradictory scrolls. You choose to release the smallest one first. It vanishes into the sky like an arrow loosed from Olympus. It feels oddly like faith. The next morning, the commander of the outpost visits in person. He says, "Your pigeon saved 30 men from a misfire." Then he coughs and says, "We're still docking your grain for last week's delay." Gratitude in Byzantium is a delicate thing. Eventually, you get a stool, a single-legged thing that wobbles every time you breathe too hard. It's meant to be an honor. You use it to reach the upper cage shelf, and you realize quietly, sleepily, that you might be good at this. Maybe not important, but consistent, reliable, the kind of person who will never be remembered by name, But whose doves kept wars from escalating and monasteries from starving? Not that anyone ever says thank you, except the birds. And they only do it by not pooping directly into your sandal. The first time you misinterpret from an imperial seal, it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like the scroll was designed to be confusing. The wax is cracked. The stamp looks like someone sneezed halfway through pressing it. And instead of the usual phrase Domini per columbam, you get a weird half smudge that could mean urgent or unwashed. You squint. You tilt your head. You even ask St. Nikitas, your most reliable pigeon, what he thinks. He just blinks at you, flaps once, and poops onto your ledger. Interpretation complete. So you guess, you pick the route you think makes sense. Monastery of St. Theodosius. Out past the salt flats. Off goes the bird. 2 days later, a rider arrives. Red-faced and sweaty, you sent the edict to the wrong monastery. He snaps. They've started fasting early and excommunicated 3 entire villages by accident. You want to say it wasn't your fault. You want to explain the wax, the symbols, the pigeon's poor attitude, but all you do is nod and refill the bird bath. This is the moment you realize something important. Byzantine communication doesn't reward accuracy. It rewards blame resistance. If you look panicked, they blame you. If you look sleepy and slightly bored, they just assume it was someone else. From that day forward, you cultivate your greatest skill, looking deeply unimportant. You become the kind of person people forget mid-sentence. You walk like furniture. You cough softly before entering a room so people don't scream. And somehow, this makes you the perfect message sorter. You receive a fresh batch of imperial orders once a week now, mostly routine stuff. Supply counts, updated feast calendars, increasingly passive-aggressive commands about icon placement, but occasionally, the Emperor's office sends something odd. One scroll is written entirely in red ink and smells like fish brine. Another is sealed with wax molded in the shape of a crescent moon. No one knows what it means, but everyone agrees it should probably go to the coast. You keep a personal glossary of imperial weirdness in the back of your codex. Red ink, panic. Probably lavender wax equal emperor's cousin drunk again. Too light to feel like parchment equals decoy. Ignore. Historians still argue whether Byzantine doves were used for true diplomacy or just internal bureaucracy. The truth, you've seen enough scrolls to know they were used for everything. Marriage proposals, troop movements, last-minute menu changes. Once, you accidentally open a scroll meant for the Empress. It's just a sketch of 2 sheep holding hands. You reseal it and never speak of it again. Your reputation grows not in fame, but in reliability. When someone has a delicate scroll, they find you. When a pigeon refuses to fly, they hand it over like it's a cursed object. And you solve things. Not with magic, not with divine wisdom, but with millet bribes and deep sighs. You create a sorting system using colored strings, each tied around a pigeon's leg. Blue for coast, green for monastic routes, red for military posts, yellow for absolutely no idea but looks serious. It's effective. Though the monks call it heretical at first, then one of their messages actually gets delivered on time. And suddenly, colored string is holy. Your coop becomes a small miracle. You install shade cloth. You fashion little water droppers. You even construct a primitive system to rotate birds based on wind patterns and molting schedules. And in all this, no one praises you. Not formally, but they stop blaming you. Which, in this world, is the highest form of affection. Then one day, a scroll arrives with a new imperial seal, an oval instead of a circle. Gold wax. Impossibly detailed. It hums when you hold it. Like it knows something. You pause. There's no instruction, just the seal and the name Abbasid line. You stare at it for an hour before choosing a bird. You pick basil, not the brightest, not the fastest, but the one who returns no matter what. You tie the scroll gently, whisper something in Greek, open your hands, and he flies. You don't know where he's going. But you do know this. The empire just shifted slightly, and you felt it through feathers and wax. 2 days later, a loaf of date bread shows up at your door. No note. Just bread? You eat it on the rooftop, barefoot, watching your birds circle the evening sky. You're starting to think this job might kill you. Or worse, keep you alive long enough to see it all fall apart. You wake up with pigeon droppings in your beard. This isn't a metaphor. There's literally bird poop in your beard. One of your more spiteful birds, probably. Theophilos must have taken offense at your snoring and decided your face was a good place to express his displeasure. Welcome to another glorious morning in the Byzantine pigeon sorting office, where every surface is either dusty, feathered, or disturbingly damp. You stretch, you yawn, your bones sound like someone stepping on old scrolls, and then you begin your day the same way you always do, cleaning out the coop, reorganizing your message ledger, and dodging aggressive wing flaps from that one bird who still thinks you're a Roman spy. The job isn't glamorous. There's no marble desk, no audience with nobles, no one writing your name into history. But there is one thing you have that no one else does, a working mental map of avian gastrointestinal timing. Because in this business, droppings aren't just waste, they're information. That's right. You've started tracking the bird's bowel movements to determine which flight paths stress them out, which ones energize them, and which ones somehow make them explosively ill. It turns out, doves react badly to flying over open marshland. Something about the smells, or maybe the frogs. You start rerouting birds around the swamps, and suddenly, message return times improve by 3 full hours. You document it all in a side scroll titled, "A most undignified map of mid-air digestive failure." Nobody asks to read it, but you keep it tucked behind the millet anyway. Meanwhile, your sorting duties are expanding. You're not just matching scrolls to birds anymore. You're being asked to decipher, and not just the scribe's appalling handwriting or lazy abbreviations like S, Theo, F, which could mean St. Theodosius Fortress or just some guy named Theo with a farm. No, now you're reading intentions, messages that say things like adjust. Northern routes according to grain favor. What does that mean? Do they want to trade grain? Is the grain blessed? Is grain favor the name of a new noble? You chew on these riddles for hours, sometimes literal hours. While birds preen around you and millet spills into your sleeves, you stare into wax and think like a confused bureaucrat. And sometimes, it works. Historians still argue whether Byzantine communication was cryptographic genius or bureaucratic confusion disguised as sophistication. You've seen enough contradictory scrolls to say, why not both? But your biggest challenge isn't the seals or the scrolls, it's the birds themselves. Because birds have moods? Oh, yes, especially pigeons. They'll fake injuries, sulk, get jealous when you favor others. You once gave a special batch of saffron millet to Irene, your best long-distance flyer. The next day, 3 other birds staged what can only be described as a sit-in. They sat in a corner, refused to fly, made weird honking noises for 5 hours. To fix it, you had to conduct a full-blown millet redistribution ceremony, with equal portions measured by weight and tied in ribboned cloths, placed at each perch in ritualistic silence. You're not proud of this, but it worked. You've become a sort of bird therapist. You soothe egos, break up pigeon feuds, and talk to them like misbehaving children. And weirdly, they respond. There's one bird, though, that no amount of millet can tame, Manuel. Manuel is large, moody, aggressively average in speed, but he has a sense for danger. Every time a scroll includes a military route, he flaps like a demon and slams into the coop walls until you let him out. He always makes it there, always returns, covered in scratches, but smug as a minor saint. You start trusting Manuel more than people. One day, you notice something strange. The wax on one scroll is slightly melted just a bit, enough to suggest it was resealed. You glance at the signature, anonymous, just a stamp shaped like a heron. You stare at the coop. You grab Manuel. He doesn't even wait for the toss. He launches himself into the sky like he's chasing fate. 2 days later, a fire breaks out in the upper monastery. You never find out what was in the scroll, but from then on, every time you see that heron seal, you use Manuel, and you don't ask questions. There are rumors, of course, that some of the monks are intercepting messages. That rival message sorters in the capital are testing your birds. That one pigeon was spotted wearing a tiny gold ring, which you're pretty sure breaks at least 2 theological rules. You ignore the gossip, you feed your birds, you clean your beard, you tie scrolls, and each night, you lie down beside the coop, listening to feathers rustle overhead like parchment in the wind. You never thought your life's greatest scandal would involve a bishop, a mislabeled dove, and a tax scroll written in the wrong dialect of Greek. But here we are. It starts innocently, as these things often do. A typical midday scroll delivery, heat pressing through the wooden shutters, a faint buzz of flies dancing over your inkpot, and your left sandal sticking to the coupe floor in a way you've chosen to stop questioning. You receive a scroll bearing a bright red wax seal military administration. It's thick, urgent, and heavy. The kind of scroll that should, under no circumstances, be delayed, lost, or confused with, say, a supply requisition meant for the Bishop of Paphlagonia. Guess what you do? To be fair, you were distracted. One of the younger birds had escaped earlier and led you on a dizzying chase around the outpost kitchen. You just washed bird droppings out of the grain bin. Your fingers were pruny and your eyes stung with vinegar fumes. You tied the scroll to Basil, not that Basil the lazy one, the pigeon who thinks flying 5 miles is a death sentence. The one who once returned from a half-day flight looking personally insulted by the sky. Off he flapped. Wrong scroll. Wrong direction. Wrong bishop. By the time anyone realizes, it's too late. The Bishop of Paphlagonia receives what he interprets as a military tax recall order. He panics, shuts down 2 monasteries, arrests a merchant caravan, has a statue of Saint Isidore melted down to pay non-existent debts. The fallout is spectacular. When word reaches your outpost, everyone suddenly remembers your name. You're summoned, not requested, not invited, summoned. A sweating official reads out your entire employment record as if it's a list of unsolved crimes. You stand there, holding a coupe feather in one hand and trying not to scratch your ear, because it itches with the force of divine punishment. What do you have to say for yourself? The official demands. You think for a long moment, then you say, that scroll should never have fit on Basil's leg. Historians still argue whether your answer was defiance, sarcasm, or divine inspiration. Whatever it was, it saves you. They demote you. Yes, technically, you're stripped of your stool privileges for a month. Your bird ledger is taken. You're assigned a strict handling duty, essentially mucking out the coop and double-checking string colors. But after a few weeks, something shifts. A message goes missing. Another sorter misroutes a scroll to the wrong garrison. A bird dies mid-flight because someone gave it honey-soaked oats instead of millet. A rookie mistake. A fatal one. You're reinstated. Quietly. No ceremony. Just a tap on the shoulder, and your stool returned. A little more wobbly than before. And now, people actually listen when you talk. You say things like that wax looks tampered with, and suddenly, a scribe puts down his pen. You suggest replacing a sick pigeon with a molting one from the backup coop, and nobody argues. Is not glory. Exactly, but it's weight. The kind that makes your footsteps feel more solid on the chapel stones, and you start taking your sorting even more seriously. You invent a new system, double tagging a primary route string and a backup. What if this goes wrong? Scroll, tucked beneath the main one. It's inefficient, yes, but far more reliable. Soon, others start copying it. You begin holding informal pigeon lectures at dusk. 3 monks attend the first one. One brings a flute. You're not sure why. By the 5th week, the entire sorting staff shows up. Not because they like you, but because their birds suddenly fly straighter and return faster when they follow your protocols. You're no longer invisible. You're inevitable. Of course, the bishop never apologizes. Why would he? He simply issues a vague decree about the sanctity of accurate message transmission. But you do get a letter from a merchant whose caravan you technically caused to be arrested. He includes a walnut cake and a note that says, "No hard feelings. But next time, please don't get me imprisoned in a wine cellar." You tape it to the coop wall, the note, not the cake. From then on, anytime someone accuses you of incompetence, you just point at that letter and say, "See, he forgave me." It becomes a small joke among the birds. You start calling the worst coop corner the bishop's seat. One day, Manuel the pigeon, with a nose for trouble, lands on your shoulder while you're cleaning it. You take that as a sign. And even though the work remains the same, droppings, string, scrolls, wind, you feel different. You made a mess and survived it, which, in Byzantium, basically makes you a saint. The bells start at dawn, not the grand cathedral ones. These are smaller chapel bells. coop chimes, metal spoons banging against brass bowls, and they all mean one thing: feed the doves or suffer their wrath. You rise before the sun cracks its sleepy yoke over the hills. Your robe sticks to your back. Your knees creak like an old wine press. And still, you shuffle toward the grain bins like it's your personal pilgrimage. There's a rhythm now. Your mornings unfold like a monastic ritual. Step 1. Whisper greetings to each bird by name. It's absurd. Yes, but it keeps them calm. And honestly, they judge you less than the monks do. Step 2. Count the sacks of millet. There are always fewer than you remember. You suspect Brother Leo is siphoning off grain to bribe cats? Again. Step 3. Portion the feed with exactitude, avoiding favorites unless you want to start another pigeon civil war. Remember what happened last time Irene got saffron twice in a row? Feathers everywhere. You've come to learn that cooperation isn't natural for birds. It's coaxed, coerced, bribed. And when you start treating millet like currency instead of food, things begin to change. They line up. They respond to tone. They even seem to understand the difference between a scolding and a sincere apology. You once stepped on Nicholas's tail feather by accident. He wouldn't fly for a week, not until you delivered a personal offering of lavender seed and a written note. Yes, written. It didn't matter that he couldn't read. The gesture was everything. Historians still debate whether Byzantine bird handlers used ritualized feeding methods or just winged it pun. Tragically, intended. But you've created your own method, millet diplomacy. It works wonders, especially in winter, because winter brings scarcity. The roads freeze. The grain wagons stall. Suddenly, millet becomes more precious than relics. The monks panic. The soldiers blame weather demons, and you ration. One handful per bird, no more. Unless you're dealing with a critical scroll, in which case the bird gets a bonus seed blend. What you call the ambassador's breakfast: crushed fig, stale bread, and 2 cloves soaked in wine vinegar. It smells terrible. They love it. You log everything, meticulously, down to the wind direction, feather condition, and what you were thinking when you tied each message. One day, you find a corner of the ledger filled with your own mutterings. Basil is brooding again. Irene flew west instead of east. Is she protesting something? Why do these birds like the bell tower more than me? Do birds believe in God? Or do they just fear thunder? You scratch those out before anyone sees. But quietly, you keep wondering. Your afternoons are for flight tests. You release 2 birds at once, one with a scroll and one as a decoy. You time them. You observe their path from the chapel roofs. Sometimes, a monk joins you, squinting into the sun like you're both reading the sky for divine signs instead of bird poop trajectories. You begin noticing flight personalities. Irene always curves left over the fig orchard. Manuel flies high and straight unless it's snowing. Little Gregor prefers to stop halfway and nap on roofs like he's some overworked scribe. You adapt accordingly. You even try attaching tiny bells to their ankles to track their landings by sound. The experiment ends when 2 birds panic and slam into a grain tower. You quietly remove the bells and write "too poetic, not practical" in your notes. By now, your reputation is such that even visiting clergy nod when they pass you. You are not liked. Exactly, but you are respected. And the birds, they begin to do something you never thought possible. They wait for you. After a long day, you return to the coop and find them all gathered, not squabbling, not flapping, just watching. You stand there, holding a chipped clay bowl of seed, and suddenly it hits you. This flock knows you, not just your scent or your routines. They know when you're angry, when you're tired, when you're pretending to be brave about a scroll marked urgent. Thrace. That night, after feeding them, you sit on your stool, watching the last light fade through the wooden slats. One bird, Theophilos, no longer spiteful, lands gently on your shoulder. You don't speak, you just sit, and for the first time in months, you don't feel like you're sorting messages for an empire. You feel like you're part of a much quieter story, a daily rhythm of wings, whispers, and crumbs passed between creatures who never asked for power. Just warmth. The wind changes before the invasion. You smell it first, sharper air off the mountains, laced with wood smoke and wet soil. The kind of wind that rattles shutters, knocks scrolls off desks, and sends the pigeons into jittery chaos. Storms. You think at first, just storms. But then come the whispers. Whispers riding in with traveling friars and salt-bitten messengers who don't linger to eat. Garrison. Bird starts arriving with feathers torn or messages scrawled on improvised scraps. Bits of linen, broken pottery, once even a flattened fig leaf. And then the silence. No birds come from the eastern outposts. None. You try not to panic. You double feed. You retest wind routes. You sit with Manuel for an hour and ask him, quietly, if he senses something off. He just blinks and nuzzles your shoulder. Then, 2 mornings later, a bird arrives from the eastern line. Half dead, no scroll, just a blood-stained string, wrapped too tightly around one leg. You untie it with trembling fingers. Your stomach tightens. You don't speak, just stare at the raw red line around its leg. That afternoon, an imperial decree arrives. Short, brutal. Prepare for movement. Eastern border breached. Messaging centers on alert. You already know. The wind knew before they did. So did the birds. You act fast. You reorganize the coop into emergency protocol. Short-distance birds on the left, long haulers on the right. You repurpose the disused scroll bins into medical beds. You wash their wounds with oil and wine. You dig out that one scroll you've been saving for years, your emergency routing map, smuggled in ink beneath a false prayer text. Historians still debate whether avian messaging contributed meaningfully to Byzantine defense systems. You don't care. You know what your birds can do. For the first time in decades, you assign every bird a critical scroll. No fluff, no feasts, just orders, warning notes, escape routes. You stand in the middle of the courtyard at dusk, cages open, and watch them rise like a dark cloud of purpose. Manuel is the last to leave. He circles once, twice then, disappears into the violet sky like he owns it. The storm rolls in that night. Not weather. War. Distant fires flicker on the horizon. The outpost is tense. The monks pray louder, but their voices tremble. One starts building a barricade out of hymnals and broken pews. You keep sorting. You keep writing. Because birds still return. Not many, but a few. They land hard, feathers frayed, eyes wide. They bring news. 2 garrisons fallen, a monastery looted, refugees flooding the mountain paths. You stay up 3 nights in a row. You sleep sitting up, ink on your fingers, millet in your hair. No one orders you to, no one even checks. But if you don't send those messages, no one will. Your legs give out on the 4th morning. You collapse beside the coop. And someone, maybe Brother Leo, places a flask of watered wine in your hand without a word. You don't drink it. You pour it into a cracked bowl for the birds. And then, the strangest thing happens. They gather, not to eat, not to fly, just to be near you. They press against your arms, settle on your shoulders, coos soft as lullabies. You whisper to them, eyes half closed. You're all that's left of the Empire's voice. Don't fail now. You release another wave that evening. Half come back, some never do. A scroll arrives bearing a green wax seal shaped like a lion's paw. That's not standard. That's rogue. A cipher. You break it open. It's a name and a place. Athanasios, Colonum Fortress. Nothing more. You don't question it. You tie the scroll to Irene, whisper the name, and throw her skyward like a prayer. You never see her again. But a week later, a caravan arrives with wounded soldiers, led by a monk who says, someone at Calonim got a message just in time. He doesn't know who sent it. Doesn't know what was in it, but you do. You sit down hard on your stool. You'd like to believe that Irene made it and dropped the message exactly when needed. You'd like to think that somewhere out there, a fortress still holds because of a bird with a scroll and an old man with sore hands. You don't tell anyone. You just feed the next wave. Like always, because war doesn't pause for applause, you're promoted on a Tuesday. There's no parade. No gold coin, no statue carved in your honor, just a single word scratched in dry ink on the corner of a folded scroll. Senior. Senior what? You ask. Nobody answers. But when you return to the coop, your stool has been replaced. It's still wood, still wobbly. But this one has 3 legs. Stability. Prestige, luxury. You sit down and feel like royalty. With your newfound status, you're gifted something even more valuable than comfort. A second ledger. This one's official, state issue. Thin lambskin pages with watermark etchings of eagles and olive branches. A ledger for someone trusted. Someone meant to keep records others will read someday. You open to the first page and pause. For a moment, you consider writing your full name. But then, you remember everyone just calls you the Birdman or Old Coops. So instead, you write, Messages in Flight, a personal record. It feels important, even if no one ever reads it. You still do your usual chores: feeding, grooming, scolding, but now, every decision you make carries a tiny echo of finality. Like the Empire's pulse is whispering beneath your fingertips. You get your own wax, your own stamp, a simple dove in profile. You start sealing decisions with it, not official ones. Of course, just the things that matter to you, like new flight maps, injury records, pigeon marriages. Yes, that's right. Pigeon marriages. You begin pairing birds who fly better together. You note their preferences. Irene and Manuel. Terrible couple. Constant preening arguments. But Saint Nicetas and little Gregor, soulmates. You don't even know how. She's fast, he's lazy, but they sync up like liturgy and wine. Historians still argue whether Byzantine bird handlers practiced avian matchmaking. You never admit it out loud, but in your notes, you've drawn a tiny wedding veil on Irene, just in case. Your day changes in subtle ways. You're no longer summoned, you're consulted. A young monk appears one morning, cradling a bird with a bent wing. He asks you, almost reverently, "Can this one still fly?" You kneel down, examine the joint, and reply, "Not far, but maybe far enough." He bows like you're a priest. At night, you start writing poetry in the margins of the new ledger. Not good poetry. Mostly things like, "Scrolls spin faster than wings can follow, but feathers still return where hearts once hollow." You're not a scribe, but the birds don't judge your meter. The war settles into a tense stillness, neither peace nor panic, just long stretches of anxious waiting. You begin planning for a future that may never come. You request better feed for the birds. You draft new training methods, shorter flights with small sand weights tied to their legs to build stamina. The pigeons complain, of course, but after a few weeks, you see improvement. You even develop what you call the silent signal, a pattern of released pigeons meant to indicate the urgency of a situation without opening any scrolls. 3 in quick succession. Critical, 1 at dusk. Coded, 2 at dawn, 1 at noon. Just showing off. Only a few handlers understand it, but that's enough. And then, unexpectedly, you're summoned to the Imperial camp, the real one. Tents like silk mountains, guards with gold-threaded tunics, scrolls thicker than bread loaves. You ride in the back of a grain cart, smell like birdseed. You look wildly out of place. An official greets you, trying not to wrinkle his nose. He leads you to a table covered in scrolls. "We want your advice," he says. You blink. "On birds." "No," he replies. "On how to deliver a message the birds refuse to carry." He shows you the scroll. The wax smells wrong, like old wine and sulfur. The parchment pulses. Your fingers itch the moment you touch it. "It's cursed," you say without thinking. He chuckles nervously. "Officially, we don't believe in curses. Unofficially," he shrugs. "You don't send it. You bury it in the coop garden. Beneath the fig tree, you mark the spot with a feather. The next day, 2 birds return unexpectedly. One's long presumed dead. You don't say a word. Just open the coop door and let them rest. That night, you sit on your 3-legged stool, ledger open, candles flickering, and for the first time in years, you allow yourself to write a new header, "Legacy Routes," for the next sorter. Because someday, maybe soon, someone else will sit on your stool, tie the strings, feed the birds, and when they do, you want them to know you tried. That amid wars and weather, scandal and scrolls, you tried to keep the message alive. The invitation is burned into beeswax, folded into the wing of a dove with one blind eye and a note tied in crimson string. Tonight, rooftop above the old bakery. Wear feathers. You think it's a prank at first. Monks have a strange sense of humor, and you've definitely fallen for worse. Remember the fake scroll declaring all pigeons required to fast during Lent? You enforced that rule for 2 days before realizing someone had drawn the imperial seal with plum jam. but curiosity wins. So, just after sunset, you climb the brittle ladder up the bakery's crumbling side. The rooftop is warm, slick with baking soot and pigeon droppings, and bathed in the light of 3 oil lanterns hanging from iron rods. There are 7 people waiting, all of them bird handlers, all from different corners of the Byzantine pigeon sorting world. You recognize 2 from message exchanges. Past one limps from a coop collapse. The other has a burn scar shaped like a map of Cappadocia. No one speaks at first. Then someone steps forward and opens a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a wax seal shaped like a feather wrapped in string. The ancient symbol of the Guild of Imperial Message Couriers. You've heard of them, of course. Every pigeon sorter has a semi-mythic group of handlers rumored to have their own rules, their own pigeon bloodlines, their own burial rites. You thought they were extinct. Apparently not. You're not inducted with ceremony, just a nod and a ribbon. A soft gray band, frayed at the edges, meant to be tied loosely around the wrist or tucked under a sleeve. Don't flaunt it, someone mutters. Don't talk about it, just know what it means. What it means, it turns out, is access to a whole different level of pigeon craft. You're introduced to salt flight routes, trained birds that follow scent trails along coastal winds, even in fog. Feather vaults, scrolls written in invisible ink made from onion skins and fig sap, legible only after resting beneath pigeon feathers for a full day. The Mourning Dove Protocol. A secret code for reporting a fallen sorter. The bird carries a feather from the deceased, tied with black thread, and delivers it to the next of kin without a scroll. Historians still debate whether such systems ever truly existed. The records are conveniently missing, the scrolls mysteriously illegible, and the birds silent as ever. But you know better now. You begin operating with discretion. You log messages like usual, but certain birds get tagged with your gray ribbon code. You start sending messages on behalf of messages, meaning sometimes you deliver a scroll that contains a false order, but the real message is the pattern in which the bird arrived. 3 slow flaps, 1 pause. Then the dive. That's all someone needs to decode. Don't trust the bearer. It's ridiculous. It's thrilling. You're far too old for this, but it lights something in you that Millet never could. The guild has rituals, of course. On the last night of every month, you light a beeswax candle in the coop, say the names of any birds who haven't returned, and feed the flock in silence. On the first frost of winter, you wear 1 pigeon feather behind your ear as a reminder. The empire forgets its messengers, but the messengers never forget each other. And then there's the wax rite. You're taught how to melt and reform seals with no visible sign of tampering, a trick involving chilled stone, wet parchment, and exactly 1 breath of steam. You swear never to use it for personal gain. You only break that rule once. A scroll arrives from a scribe you've grown fond of. His seal is intact, but you recognize the edge of the parchment. It was yours. Once, something you lost weeks ago. You melt the wax. Inside is a crude drawing of a dove wearing a crown, surrounded by hearts. You reseal it. You send it back with a scroll of your own. No words, just a feather tied in a bow. Nothing comes of it. But the next time you see him, he offers you a fresh fig with no explanation. You accept it. Your life hasn't changed dramatically. You still smell like feathers, still have millet in your socks, but now you belong to something. A forgotten tradition still fluttering at the edge of memory. And when a bird doesn't return, you no longer say it's lost. You say it joined the silence. It starts with a bird refusing to land. At first, you think it's just the wind, or maybe the bird's off kilter again. Gregor's always had a flair for dramatic entrances, often circling for far too long, like he's waiting for applause. But this time, it isn't Gregor, it's Cassia, one of your newer birds. Steady, reliable, no nonsense. And right now she's flapping in tight spirals over the chapel, cooing in an unfamiliar pattern, clutching a scroll in her leg that's already begun to unravel from the strain. You raise your arm. She doesn't come down. You whistle. Still nothing. Finally, you climb onto the coop roof and hold up a bit of crushed walnut. She lands, but something is wrong. You untie the scroll and immediately see it. No seal, no string, no wax. Just plain parchment, scrawled with shaky ink that reads, "The doves have turned." You blink. Read it again. The doves have turned. That's it. No name. No destination. Just dread. The birds around you seem off. A ripple of restlessness passes through the flock. Feathers puff. Wings twitch. Even Manuel, usually stone calm, huffs once and hops to the far side of his perch. And that's when you notice it. More birds are returning with routes altered. One from Mount Oxentios, meant to go north, lands from the west. A monastery courier arrives carrying a scroll she shouldn't have. You double-check your tags, your strings, your notes. You haven't made a mistake. The birds have, or so you think. Then you follow a trail of droppings. It leads to the edge of the outpost, to a tiny hidden shrine built into the side of a crumbled well. One of the brothers calls it the Icon Corner, a place to leave prayers when the chapel feels too public. You've never paid it much attention, until now, because inside, tucked between two worn statues of unnamed saints, are dozens of seed wrappers, unmarked, fresh, coated with a scent you don't recognize, cloying, sweet, unnatural. You pocket one and return to the coop. When you offer it to Cassia, she lunges at it, frantic, like she's starving. You test the rest of the flock. Half of them react the same way. Something or someone is training your birds to favor new locations, to change allegiance. You sit down hard on the coop threshold. It's not sabotage, it's belief. Some of the birds have started favoring shrines that are, let's just say, controversial, iconoclast shrines. Now, look, no judgment. You don't care whether the emperor wants gold halos or bare walls. You just want your birds to fly straight and poop outside the ledger margins. But this is different. Your birds are choosing heresy. Historians still argue whether pigeons can be trained to favor certain religious locations based on ritual scent markers. You're no scholar, but you do know birds, and these birds have been bribed. You trace it back to a novice monk named Demetrios, nervous, thin, smells like fig wine and mint sap. You catch him slipping a sugar-wrapped crumb beneath the coop gate one morning. Just being kind, he says. Kindness doesn't smell like boiled innis. You reply. He shrugs. The birds go where the spirit leads them. You report him. Quietly. No punishment follows. Just a transfer. He vanishes the next week. But the birds don't forget. From then on, you can't trust the flock blindly. You have to test them, routinely. You develop the scent neutrality method. You wash every coop perch in olive ash and lemon peel, scrub scroll bindings with vinegar, and stop all feeding for 12 hours before flight. It's brutal, necessary. You lose 2 birds to fatigue, 1 to a fox. It hurts, but slowly, the balance returns. Still, something nags at you. You keep that phrase in your ledger, carved beneath the ribbon bookmark. The doves have turned. It becomes a kind of mantra. Anytime a scroll goes missing, anytime a monk questions your routes, anytime a bird returns from the wrong direction, you write those words in the margins. The doves have turned. You know what it means now? It's not rebellion. It's influence. Someone learned what you already knew. Birds follow patterns, smells, rewards, repetition. So what happens when someone decides to use that to reroute the empire's veins? You stare at the flock, hundreds of them now. Trusted, trailed, watched, but never fully owned. And for the first time, you wonder, what if you're not a sorter? What if you're a puppet and someone else has the seed? There's a scroll in your hand that shouldn't exist. It arrives just before dawn. Tied to a dove you don't recognize, sleek, unfamiliar, with feathers that shimmer gray-blue like cold steel. Its eyes are sharper than your own. Military bird. You think, maybe even from the capital. You untie the scroll carefully. The wax is unmarked. Just smooth, too smooth. A texture like it's been pressed by a seal that isn't a seal at all. Your breath catches as you read the message. 1 bird, 2 empires. If it returns to you, say nothing. No signature. No cipher. Just that chilling line. You check the tag again. No string. No bead. No ribbon. But you recognize the hand that tied the knot around the dove's leg. It's yours. You stare at the bird, heart thudding. Somehow, one of your own pigeons has crossed imperial lines and come back altered. It shouldn't be possible. Byzantine policy is very clear. No birds cross enemy territory. They are trained not to land there, not to rest, not even to glide overhead for long. Most message birds are localists, loyal, predictable. But this one, This one left the empire and returned with a foreign message. You take it inside and place it in the recovery cage. It doesn't fight, doesn't coo. It just watches you like it knows what it did. For days, you tell no one. You hide the scroll under the coop's floorboards and feed the bird by hand. You name her Echo because she brings back things you didn't send out. And then, the second message arrives. Same bird, new scroll, same seal, the smooth, unmarked wax. Echo is not alone. 10 birds have crossed. 3 have returned. You hold the 4th. This one is written in both Greek and Arabic. Side by side, every word mirrored. Perfect translation. You read it 10 times. You don't sleep that night. The next morning, you go to your private ledger, the secret one, and begin mapping every flight Echo ever took. You pull out old route tags, review food logs, search for signs you missed. Nothing. But the scrolls keep coming, each more cryptic than the last. All from the same foreign handler. Someone who clearly knows the Empire's codes, the guild's signals, maybe even your name. The messages aren't hostile, not overtly. They mention weather patterns, grain shortages, supply rumors, prayer locations. It's information, logistics, infrastructure, and then a simple offer. We don't have to be enemies. One bird can serve 2 truths. You know this is dangerous, treasonous. If anyone finds out, you'll be exiled at best, flayed at worst. But you also know something else. The Empire isn't winning. The eastern frontier is collapsing. Garrison birds arrive fewer and fewer each month. Refugee scrolls speak of silenced towns gone, bridges burned, roads watched. Maybe this handler isn't a threat. Maybe they're a mirror. So you restart. You choose Basil, not fast, but reliable. You tie your own message. Echo flew well. What else do you know about the winds in Comagene? You don't sign it. You don't use wax, just your old ribbon. Frayed, gray, faded. You send it east. It returns in 6 days. The scroll it brings is full of wind charts, grain forecasts, border troop estimates data more accurate than anything the Empire's messengers have brought you in months. You reread it, stunned. Historians still argue whether there was ever a coordinated pigeon-based truce between Byzantine and Abbasid outposts. Most call it unsubstantiated, but you don't care. You've seen it. 1 bird, 2 empires. You never tell the guild, never tell the monks. You keep a separate codex hidden behind the coop chimney. Echo's ledger where you record each exchange. You and the nameless handler trade not just data, but fragments of life. What do your birds eat before a sandstorm? Do yours dream in flight? Have you named your best flyer? You both send back answers. 1 scroll includes a hand-drawn sketch of a dovecote made of marble and pearl, perched on a cliff above an oasis. Beneath it, a single line, "You'd be welcome here, if ever the wind turns." You close your eyes and imagine it. Then feed Echo and return to your sorting bench. You still serve the Empire, but now, when you tie your strings and knot your ribbons, you wonder which truth you're carrying. Or if, somehow, you've built a bridge of feathers, one that floats between empires, silent and unseen. And it all began with a bird who refused to forget the way home. It's spring when she arrives. You don't notice her at first. There are always travelers this time of year. Pilgrims, messengers, monks pretending not to be drunk. But this one is different. She walks like someone who knows where every hawk in the sky is hiding. She doesn't ask permission, just walks straight into the coop, lifts a sleepy dove with 1 gloved hand, and says, "Your birds are soft, too trusting." You clear your throat. She turns. Sunlight catches her eyes, sharp, amber, a little too amused. Her cloak is deep brown, stitched with tiny feathers at the collar. On her belt, a falconer's glove, worn through at the wrist. You hate her instantly, which is, of course, a problem. Because hating someone is dangerous when they look like that. When they carry birds that could tear your pigeons in half. "I'm just visiting," she says. "Nothing official." "Then don't touch my birds." She smirks. "They're not yours. They're the Empire's." You almost spit, but you don't. Instead, you stare at her glove. "How many of yours are trained to kill?" "Enough," she says. You pause. Then, "How many are trained to return?" That shuts her up. For a moment, her name is Thalassa. You learn it by accident. overhear it when one of the scribes brings her dried figs and stumbles over his own boots trying to impress her. She's a falconer from the western garrison. Her birds aren't messengers. They're weapons, trained to dive. Shred, Mom. You once spent 3 days nursing a pigeon back to health after one of her kind mistook him for lunch. And now she's in your coop, watching your doves with quiet disdain. You start avoiding her, deliberately feeding earlier, pretending not to hear her questions. But she stays for weeks, and every day, something shifts. It's small at first. She compliments Manuel's wingspan. She brings herbs for the pigeon's water. She sharpens your spare quills without asking. And one night, as you patch a cracked perch, she says softly, "Your birds are braver than mine." You glance up. She shrugs. "Mine do what they're told. Yours choose." You don't reply, but the truth lands somewhere deep, like a feather caught in the hollow of your ribs. You start walking together, not on purpose. You just both happen to be near the rooftops at dusk, watching for returning birds, pretending not to talk. She tells you things about training falcons to respond to shadows, not just signals, about sleeping in trees during raids, about losing her favorite hawk in a sandstorm, and burying its glove beside a fig tree because no one else would understand the grief. You listen, and eventually, you tell her about Echo, about the foreign scrolls, the border messages, the bird who never forgot you. She doesn't laugh, doesn't report you. She just says, "I had a hawk once who stopped attacking and started circling above wounded men, like she was guarding them." You both sit in silence after that. Historians never write about these kinds of moments. No records, no ledgers, just two handlers, one for war, one for words watching the wind shift together. One morning, she hands you a scroll. "From me," she says, "not the Empire." You read it later, alone in the loft. "If we ever leave this place, take your birds. I'll teach them to fly high. You teach mine to come home." It's not a proposal, not quite, but you write her back, "You'll hate my birds. They sulk when it rains." She sends a reply tied to a raven. "So do I." You keep the ribbon she used, just once, before she's reassigned. You let her hold Basil. He sits on her arm like he belongs there. She whispers something to him, something you don't hear. Then she walks away. You don't watch her go, but that night, every bird in the coop sleeps facing the west. You knew it was coming. The cold had arrived early, bitter and dry. The fields had failed again. One monk was caught watering the grain with melted wax, hoping the Lord might mistake it for rain. The livestock thinned, and the pigeons grew quieter, coos shorter, movements lazier, as if conserving hope along with body heat. Then, the inevitable, a whisper in the mess hall, a missing jar of pickled onions, 2 sacks of millet gone, and 3 birds roasted over an illegal fire in the cellar. You confront Brother Heron first. He doesn't deny it. "We were starving," he says, brushing ashes from his robe. "And they were just animals." Your jaw clenches. "They carried messages, saved lives." He shrugs. "They also taste like duck." You ban him from the coop. He doesn't fight it. But now the damage is done. Panic spreads faster than frost. You station yourself by the coop at night, wrapped in rags and a moth-eaten blanket, breathing clouds into your palms. You sleep with the birds. You share your rations, crushing stale bread into crumbs. You tuck the sickest ones into your sleeves. Basil nests in your hood. Manuel stands guard by the door, puffed and alert, like a feathered bouncer. But still, the flock begins to vanish, 1 every few nights, then 2. You try marking them, hoping to track what's happening. You find one of your gray guild ribbons outside the pantry, torn. And that's when you realize it's not outsiders, it's not even hunger, it's desperation. From within, the monks are eating your best flyers. They think you don't know, but you know. You start naming the missing out loud. During morning prayers, over soup, under your breath in the hallways. Every time someone looks away when you say Gregor, you mark their name down. Historians rarely acknowledge famine-induced internal breakdowns in monastic communities. Too shameful, too human. But here, in your little empire of feathers, the line between sacred and survival is collapsing. You go full vigilante. You booby-trap the coop door with tripwire made from braid strings and wax thread. You set up decoy birds, wooden shapes with painted feathers and blackened beaks. You start locking the feed beneath your bed. The birds sense the tension. They grow more skittish. Even Irene refuses to fly some days. Then, one night, you catch them, 3 monks, in the courtyard, net in hand. Quiet laughter, drunken breath. You don't speak. You just raise your hand signal sharp, military, and 6 birds dive from the rafters like knives. Not to hurt, just to shock. It works. One screams, one drops the net. The third slips on pigeon droppings and sprains something noble. You don't report them. You make them clean the coop every night. For a month, in silence, you don't lose another bird. But you know what the famine did, what it still could do. So you make changes. You consolidate the flock. Fewer long-distance routes, tighter rotations. Only the most trusted birds fly now. You start cooking millet yourself, forming it into dense, sticky loaves and hiding them beneath the coop in a clay pot. You label relics of Saint Zosimas. No one touches them. And through it all, you talk to the birds more. You tell them stories. You hum lullabies. You remind them they are more than meat, that they are the empire's breath, that they carry words, not just weight. One morning, Irene lands on your shoulder, drops a scroll at your feet, and refuses to move until you open it. It's a child's drawing. A pigeon, mid-flight, halo above its head. Signed simply, Brother Leo. You pin it above the feed shelf. That day, the birds sing louder. Not coos, not calls. Something else, something older, rhythmic, unified. It's not a miracle. It's not enough to end famine, but it's hope. Feathered and fragile and still warm. And for now, that's all you need. You receive the summons in the form of a pigeon wearing a ribbon. Bright blue, silk, ridiculous, tied around its middle like it's being entered in a livestock fair. You nearly laugh until you see the scroll it's carrying. Thick, pressed, bearing the emperor's seal and the unmistakable words, "You are hereby commanded to participate in the imperial games of message excellence. Attendance is not optional." You stare at the bird. We're doing this again. Because yes, this absurd ritual still exists. The annual message sorting games, a Byzantine tradition that began as a way to encourage inter-monastery cooperation and has since devolved into a festival of petty rivalry, creative cheating, and absolutely no spiritual value. You've avoided it for decades. Faked fevers, invented deaths. Once, you claimed your best pigeon had joined a hermitage and you were grieving. But this time, there's no wiggle room. So you pack your birds, your string, your stool, yes, the 3-legged one, and head for the outer capital, where the games are being held in the overgrown courtyard of a decommissioned mint. You arrive to chaos, coops from every corner of the empire, handlers dressed in absurd livery. One man wears a tunic covered in actual feathers. Another rides in on a litter carried by children holding scrolls like torches. You roll in with a wheelbarrow full of pigeons and a face that says, "Please don't talk to me." But they talk. They all talk. Is that Basil? I thought he retired. Do your birds even know how to turn left? Are you the one who let a bishop get excommunicated by accident? You grit your teeth, smile politely, whisper to Basil, "We're going to crush them." The events are as ridiculous as ever. Speed dispatch. Tie. Launch. Return. Fastest route wins. Blind scroll matching. Match fake messages to correct destinations using only wax scent and string length. Flight obstacle course. Through hoops, smoke, and flags. Avian trivia round. You're asked how many molting seasons a pigeon has, and whether doves were mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles. They were not. Thank you very much. You get through it. Basil performs like a saint. Irene is graceful, efficient, flawless. Even Manuel, grumpy as ever, nails a return route. No one expected him to finish. You're in the final round. It's a head-to-head dispatch relay. 3 scrolls, 3 birds, 3 destinations across the makeshift city maze. You're paired against a smug handler named Pelagius, who insists on oiling his birds before launch. You focus. Scroll 1 coastal route. Irene. Scroll 2 monastery paths. Little Gregor. Scroll 3 unmarked paths. High risk. You look at Manuel. He flaps once, stares into the wind like he sees something no one else does. You tie the scroll. Release. The crowd cheers. Flags flap. You wait. 10 minutes pass. Pelagius's birds begin to return oiled, gleaming, smug. Then Irene returns. Then Gregor. No sign of Manuel. You feel it before you see it. The hush, the shift in the air. Then Manuel lands, dusty, ruffled, late. But in his talon, 2 scrolls. You frown. You open the first, yours, delivered. The second, it's Pelagius's scroll. His bird never made it. Manuel picked it up mid-route. You hold both up. The judges blink. Consult each other. Finally, they declare, unorthodox, but effective. You win. Your prize, a bag of millet, dyed gold, and a scroll certifying your excellence in imperial communication relay and emergency recovery. You pin it to the co-op wall with a feather. That night, back in your outpost, you sit with Manuel on your knee. You old traitor, you whisper. You saved a scroll that wasn't yours. He coos like he meant to all along. Historians never write about the games. Too frivolous, too undignified. But for one day each year, the Empire remembers its messengers. And for once, so do you. It's raining when your last dove disappears. Not the soft kind, not poetic mist. This is the kind of rain that soaks the mortar, curls parchment, and drowns the smell of cedar and pigeon dust. You sit under the coop's leaky awning, shoulders hunched, listening to the storm drum across your bones. You weren't expecting the scroll. It arrived that morning, tied to Irene's leg, tired, thin, and shaking. She collapsed on your sorting table, feathers ragged from wind and hunger. You cupped her gently, murmured thanks, untied the scroll, a thin slip. Only 5 words. Send it by her only. The script was unfamiliar. The wax, a marble blend of dark red and gray, bore no symbol, no seal. You held it for a long time, watching Irene rest in your lap like an old friend come to say goodbye. You knew what it meant. One last flight. No backups, no relay. No other birds trusted for this path. A destination far beyond the usual routes. Mountains, rivers, maybe borders, maybe worse. You didn't ask what was inside, didn't try to decode it. You just wrote in your ledger, Irene, final dispatch, winds light, wings uncertain, trust absolute. And you tied the scroll. You pressed your forehead to hers, whispered the name of the cliff she once loved to circle, and let her go. She didn't look back. That was 7 days ago. Now the rain pours harder. The perch she once owned stands empty. Basil watches it with twitching eyes. Manuel hasn't left his roost. Even the younger birds seem quieter, feathers damp and unsure. You don't sleep that night, or the next. On the 3rd day, you burn your own message. A letter you wrote years ago, meant for the Emperor. You never sent it. Too long, too angry, too honest. You watch the flames devour your words and think, maybe Irene is doing the same. Flying the last message I'll never read. The next morning, a monk finds you outside, soaked, red-eyed, holding a soggy parchment and refusing to speak. You clean the coop twice that day, not because it's dirty, just to move. Just to listen to wings and fluttering sounds that don't say her name. By the 5th day, you accept the truth. She's not coming back. You open your ledger, cross out her name, then pause. You write instead, flight incomplete, purpose fulfilled. It's what you hope is true. And then something odd happens. The birds begin to behave differently, not frantic, not mournful, but focused. They fly tighter loops, land in coordinated patterns, 2 at a time, then 3 routes. They've never flown before, uncharted, unsanctioned, but accurate, predictive. You start mapping them. You start watching for a pattern. And that's when it hits you. She trained them. Somehow, in those last months between scrolls, between flights Irene taught them, her departures, her returns, her pauses on the archway, above the fig tree, each was the signal. A message not for you, but for them. And now they're flying like she's still guiding them. You cry, just once. The coop feels holy now, like she left something inside the wood grain. Not her body, not her wings, but her rhythm. And one evening, while sorting the last of the week's scrolls, you find a parchment beneath the nest box, folded neatly, dry. Somehow, you open it. It's a sketch. A dove, drawn in soft strokes, not flying, not caged, just open-winged, facing east. Beneath it, don't chase me. you taught me to fly. You don't know who wrote it, but it's her. You frame it above your stool, and for the rest of your days, you never send another message tied to a bird without thinking. What would Irene have done with this win? Because some birds don't return, some become the sky itself. The coop is quiet now. Not silent, never silent. The pigeons still murmur in the rafters. Feathers rustle like old paper, and every so often a sleepy coo breaks the stillness like a yawn in a library. But the frenzy is gone. The panic, the urgency. You sit on your stool, three-legged, slightly warped, and you listen. You're old now. You feel it in your bones, in the way your hands tremble when tying a scroll, in how long it takes you to climb the steps to the rooftop. You no longer run to greet returning birds. You wait, and they come to you. Sometimes 3 or 4 will land on your shoulders at once, like you're a statue. Sometimes you don't even notice until one pecks your ear for millet. You take this as a compliment. You've sorted your last official message. It came 2 weeks ago, marked with the Emperor's seal and the words, transfer of sorting duties to junior handler. Retire at will, as if it were a choice. The new handler is competent, eager. He whistles too much and spills millet everywhere. But the birds seem amused. They've taken to testing him, flying circles, hiding scrolls under floorboards, returning just late enough to make him nervous. You've taught them well. You spend your days writing now not messages, but memories. You've started compiling what you call the Feather Book, a collection of everything the birds taught you that no one ever asked to know. Like, don't trust a pigeon who preens too much. Fog confuses them less than priests do. Every bird has a favorite direction. Find it, and you'll never lose them. You sketch their flight paths, chronicle their rivalries. There's a whole chapter dedicated to Manuel's petty grudges, and another about Basil's obsession with chimney smoke. You write until your hand cramps. Then you nap beneath the coop, warmed by the breath of birds who've known you their whole lives. You don't leave, even though you could, even though the monastery offered to relocate you to the coast, somewhere warmer, somewhere with fewer feathers. But this is your home, the only one that ever made sense. At night, you light the last of your guild candles. You perform the rituals quietly, not out of duty, but respect. You speak the names of the lost, Gregor, Irene, Saint Nikitas, Echo, birds who changed routes and never returned. Not failures, just messengers who found a longer way home. You tie a gray ribbon to the doorpost and tuck the rest of your wax into a jar labeled simply, in case of wind. Then, one morning, you wake to find the flock gone. All of them. Cages empty. Perches still swinging. A single feather in your hair like a kiss from the sky. You don't panic. You wait. You sweep the floor, make tea, write a final note in your ledger. They've taken the long route. By evening, they return. Not all, just some. Enough. They land quietly, as if they knew you'd be waiting. You feed them slowly, humming an old song no one taught you, but you somehow always knew. And then, as the sun slips behind the chapel, and the world turns soft and blue, you sit on your stool one last time. A single dove lands on your knee, not one you recognize. You look at her. She looks at you. Tied to her leg is a scroll. No seal, no string. You open it. Inside, just a single line. The coop is yours forever. You smile, because you already knew. The light fades slowly now. Everything stretches shadows, sighs, time itself. You close your ledgers, tuck away your strings. The air smells of old feathers and lavender, like parchment left beside a sunlit window. You move slower now, not because of age, but because you finally can. Outside, the world murmurs. A distant bell, the shuffle of sandals, the wind pressing gently against the chapel walls like a hand that remembers you. The birds coo above, soft and satisfied. They're not waiting for messages. They're not bracing for storms. They're just breathing, wing to wing, still as folded scrolls. You rise one last time, feed the flock, water the perch, whisper names you haven't said in years. And then you sit again, settle into the curve of your old stool, and close your eyes. Somewhere out there, a bird is flying carrying no message at all, just wing beats, just breath. You let that thought carry you, like a feather in a warm current. You don't know where the wind is taking you next. But it's okay. You taught them how to come home, and now you rest.